So a little bit about Todd. Let's hear a little bit about you.
So with Circle K, and everybody, well, not everybody, I mean, there's probably a few people in this country who don't know who Circle K is, but we're more than just a convenience store, someplace you stop for a six-pack of Coke on your way home, or chips and such. But we're more than that. We are definitely a global organization, and one of the other things that's kind of a fun fact is that we supply Europe 40% of its fuel energies. So that's Europe itself. And that includes everything from maritime fuels to airline fuels. You fly into Ireland, fly out of Ireland, you just fly out on Circle K, as an example. So there's their terminals, our energy, we've got a tremendous amount of regulations we have to watch for. So GRC is huge, right? You can only imagine. You know, there's also other EU privacy standards, and you drop into the individual countries, whether in the Baltics or Scandinavia or other parts of Europe or Eastern Europe or even Asia areas. They all have their own privacy, so we have a tremendous amount of GRC stuff that we have to keep an eye on. And as well as one of the things I'm really proud of with Circle K is their philanthropy. They don't advertise it, and you won't see it in the news, but there's a lot of charities that Circle K funds and also supports. And this is my personal philosophy. Really, it kind of boils down to my tool rationalization, as well as really gets down to a single point of truth and alert fatigue. Anybody who's been in monitoring can understand that, right? It's like, okay, what tools are we getting alerts from? How are we getting those alerts? Which one's a single point of truth? What do we actually listen to? So
I told Todd that we need to put his initials behind this, and we're going to slap it into a textbook. So we'll be seeing this another time, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So we're going to cover a lot today about Circle K's journey and what Todd and his team has done in just over a year. And it's been a lot with Cribl in just that time. And then also leave some time to talk about what, future Cribl could look like. But typically, most of everyone knows here that conversations usually start around license capacity and helping with license capacity for your SIM. But then we start to uncover some additional challenges. So Todd, tell us some of your primary challenges when you first started talking to the Cribl team.
Yes, so probably like most, you're tasked with a budget at some point, and usually that is a mythical date, and you're also looking into a mythical crystal ball to try to figure out what your budget's going to be for the following year, not knowing what the business is bringing to you, not knowing emerging technologies are going to be brought into the business, already been purchased that you have to log, right? So growth and acquisitions are really big, and we're going at a pace to where our licensing couldn't keep up, right? It was just, we were starting to ingest too much. And then trying to reduce the ingestion, trying to focus on what was important security, and our logging at that point, forget about the business stuff, just security alone, was what kind of opened our eyes to a company called Cribl. And so one of our VARs brought Cribl to us. And before I go further, our journey wouldn't be successful. And I'm standing up here, I'm not talking about it. It wasn't me, right? My successful journey was because of Marlo, who's over here.
Marlo.
Thank you, Marlo. It was also Tom. Add Jenna to the mix. And also the PS team with Brian. So I just want you guys shout outs because none of this would have happened without their guidance. But really, when we adopted Cribl, and I use the word adopted, it was because it was like they were part of my team, I was part of their team, right?
Yeah.
So I feel strongly about that. And if you're a customer, you already know what I'm talking about, right? Mm-hmm. They're really interested in your business and how they can help you and how you can take your ideas and use cases and grow those into something more than what you expected. So our growth and acquisitions were very huge. So I mentioned we have on the slide, it said 14,000 stores. We're actually over 16,000 now. Yep. Through acquisitions. And so that, along with the growth within our own business units because of the previous acquisitions and how we're bolting on different companies that we acquired, at some point there's some regulation, right, TSAs and stuff to bring them across, and all of a sudden they become part of your network and because your information systems and your just-in-time supplies. Those I'm not aware of, and no one makes that aware of to the guys that are responsible for the security most of the time, right? We're at the end of the whip. So those are hitting us big. So that was one of them. The second one was looking at operationalizing the critical data. So in retail or with terminals and your IGCs or your GRCs or all those little acronyms, sometimes you start looking at data and you're trying to figure out what logs you're actually supposed to pull and what you're supposed to see. And the idea isn't just to grab everything, because then you end up with what I call them storage units. You got things full of stuff, you forget what's in there, but you're paying for it and it's filling up space. So understanding what those logs were coming in, and sometimes there was no TAs forms, there's no SIM log, there's nothing for them, you have to figure it out yourself. Cribl actually helped us there as well. And then that growth and storage, and we'll talk a lot about that in a minute. But once again, storage costs and also the cloud, right? So everybody's on the cloud, we're a hybrid. We have a lot of colos, we have our equipment, we have stuff in the cloud everywhere. But those egress charges, and so actually one of my use cases we'll talk about is how we reduce the cost of egress charges out of the cloud as well.
Yeah. And we'll get into some network diagrams and all of that too for it. Yeah. So now that we know what the challenges were, and now we can talk about some of the successes that Circle K has had. And part of this is understanding the journey. So Todd and his team, we did a POV. It was like a 3-day POV, very fast. And so tell us a little bit about, what the journey has been like for you, what the time frame was, and tell us about some of these highlights here.
Sure. Yeah, we probably had the shortest POV with anybody, I'm guessing, because we're really looking at reducing the log sizes, right, to start with. And so when we had our POV, I think on the 3rd day, I was asking for a quote.
Oh, yeah.
Marla, I mean, it was the quickest length of journey ever. It was like, okay, I got your support, I could see what's going on. And that included, I think, day 1 where I sent them some logs and they modeled it out for me. So that included that day as well. So actually looking at live data and stuff, it was 2 days and I was ready for a quote. So it went very quick. But like I said, a lot of that was our strategy and our decision, but it was really fostered by the support of the whole Cribl team itself and truly understanding what our data was going to look like and what I was trying to reduce. As well, before I get into it, is like, right now Circle K, we've only been really with Cribl for about a year. So our journey has been pretty short as far as what I think, from what we got done so far, it was a lot. And looking at that, I'm just going to throw out there, year to date on average, we've actually reduced our ingestion into our SIM by 77% across the board.
So overall, 77%. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty strong, I think, right? And when you think about that, it's easy to say, okay, 77%, but what does that really mean? We currently have 18 pipelines and 28 routes. Okay. And you start thinking about that, okay, our EPS, how does that affect the performance? I know you mentioned it previously on other presentations, but that not only affects performance on the SIM, but then also it affects the performance on your intelligence.
Exactly.
Right, that you're also piping in and you're tying to, right? Or the correlation of those other pieces. So it has a economy of scale, so to speak, across the board. So it's not just what's being ingested. So on one pipeline alone, we reduced it 314,000 events per second.
Yeah, that's huge. That's going to be a lot better
big, right?
performance, accelerated searches. It's going to result in all of that down the line.
Yeah, so it goes down. So and we start talking about, being faster, like onboarding, right? Now, everybody can onboard data, right? Yeah. But who has the time to tune that data to see what you really want out of there, what you don't need out of there? So what I appreciate is my team doesn't have the time, and I definitely don't. So using Cribl was able to that fast. Now I can see the logs coming in right there. We can manage them, we can regex, we could use packs, we could use knowledge objects, or, tables, and really focused on it quickly.
Yeah.
And so we'll be showing you a graph in a few minutes about what that looks like in real time to us and how we've gone through that. But really, it's just, we're down to billions and billions of events. I was doing the math, I think it's somewhere around 30 billion events that we're filtering out a month total. So I just kind of put it out to it as well. So remember, worldwide, right? So we're looking at Europe, all the stores we have globally, everything around. There's a lot of data that we're pulling back and how we're pulling that back and pulling in. So initially it was reduced logs, but then after we saw the performance, what was going on, we had to expand that. So that goes like into the performance with tuning and such, and acceleration on things. But then also, the faster response times, just knowing the critical data that you've tuned, you know where it's going. If you have to fork it into multiple indexes and bring up those points, you're able to do that at a much faster pace. And then it leaves you some time to be proactive, but also now, what we've done, we start working with the businesses because now we see other data that might help them by pulling in from other directions.
Yep.
So we're trying to expand and take this, instead of being a complete cost center all the time, is how we're looked at, right? Everybody's looked at as a cost center. But now we're trying to just put this back into business, right? So helping them make data-driven decisions that will actually improve the business or the customer's response time with the different applications, or as well as their convenience to the stores and the pumps and so on and so forth.
Exactly. And now we have some great numbers at the bottom here. We talk about log reduction out of the box, custom, and then we have storage reduction as well. So with the first log reduction out of the box, step one, use the packs, get that fast time to value, do that in the POV, get a little taste of what you can do, and then tell us how you're doing some of the other stuff, some of that custom log reduction.
Yeah, so down below here are just a few use cases I just listed. It'd be real easy and simple for we got a couple different kinds of firewall technologies. You can see that what the packs are doing with those. But then on the log reduction, where we're at 60% for our MFA technologies, as well as 99% for performance. Now I start working with the business as well. And a lot of that is built around using knowledge objects or lookup tables.
Lookup tables, yep.
Yeah. And they're very easy to put in place, very design. If anybody hasn't used them yet, they are a game changer as well, and you have complete control over them, and they're very simple. That's how we're able to achieve those numbers themselves and looking at it. Because at any given time, you can also go in and re-edit those if you need to make an adjustment right now, and then that data is being consumed and being ingested, right? Whether you're sending it to your SIM or you send it to a data lake you want to store later, it's just maybe some additional information. And this is what we're going into actually our SIM to help that reduce that license cost. I'm a big fan of Cribl. It helped budget tremendously. And you can also see here, like one of the use cases was our GRC storage. As I mentioned, we have endless GRC, endless regulations that we have to keep data for. And by knowing what we have to keep, I was able to fork that information off to a different indexes and storage. But we went from 136 terabytes a year of storage down to 1.6 terabytes a year.
Huge savings with that.
And that is huge because now this is data I don't have to go deep freeze somewhere, right? I can keep it just warm all the time. And so whenever we have a regulation come in or we have an auditor come in, regardless of that from around the world, we have that data right there. We can just pop it up and keep showing it to them over and over and over again. And so that has really been a game changer for us as well.
And again, you're using those lookups to tag what needs to be GRC, what's going to a specific index, and what needs to actually be stored for those 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, depending on what the retention requirement is.
Yeah.
All right. So we talked a little bit about reduction. That was a big one, storage reduction. Another one that is huge that we found out a little bit later on that we can do is actually using Cribl to review and normalize data. So start opening up the floodgates. You see Todd had an uh-oh moment where what was it? You deployed it to like 22,000 endpoints. Yeah. You tell the story, Todd.
Yeah, so we had some overzealous folks push some things out, 22,000 hosts overnight. Yep. And you can see where the purple is, where it's what was sent to Cribl. The pink is what was sent to the SIM, and the turquoise trend line is the reduction. So you can see here actually in real time, this is over 30 days, where we had that uh-oh moment, and reached out to everybody. Jenna was part of this, like, okay, how do I address this right now, real quick, get this fixed? And I felt really dumb afterwards, after they told me the solution. But I didn't want to mess anything else up that we were ingesting, right? It took like 4 minutes to regulate that.
But that was huge because we didn't want to disrupt the rest of the business. So they already deployed this. What can we do in Cribl very quickly to stop it from going, give us a moment to actually review what this data is and start to normalize it?
Yeah. And then we went through a data review process. I brought it down, started reviewing it. We started tuning it. And then you can see the normalization, where everything where it went back to. And you can see the reduction on there as well. Now, something I'd like to mention is that we found a use case for Cribl is actually to put some stop or blocks in there for that ever happening again, right? Because we're people. People make mistakes. Sometimes systems will do something you didn't expect it to do. So this was a good thing too, is that, okay, now we have blocks built into Cribl to be able to not only identify that, but to block and keep it from happening again.
Yep. Exactly. So, and what are you using in order? We know this is in the sim here that you built this dashboard, but what are you using to actually know what this data reduction is?
So this here, what you're looking at right now is a combination of using Cribl metrics as well as our sim metrics. And so I was able to build this. And so that's where I can quantifiably show this as well as the revenue that we're actually retaining, not having to spend to senior leadership to show them the value in this as well, right? And what it's also done is taken this where I was able to open up a little bit more to other use cases and more of the business as well. So it's not just now what I'm looking at it as a tool that I own, it's my sandbox, stay out of it, but I'm trying to leverage it with the rest of the business, and we're actually starting to glean a little bit of information that they couldn't see before.
Yep, exactly. And so now we've heard a little bit about the use cases, how everything was done, what that first year journey was like. And now, we've heard Todd say, this is a global company, it's a multi-cloud deployment, saving on egress costs. So let's talk a little bit about what that actually looks like for you.
Sure. So our kind of this infrastructure I have right now with Cribl that's been laid out, I didn't know what to call it, so I apologize, but I had stream, so I called it the aqueduct.
That's great.
It just makes sense to me because what I do is I want to put together an architecture that anybody, whether you're developing, whether you're doing gamification. So Circle K is real big on sip and save. So for $9.99 a month, you can get a beverage of choice, a large beverage, one a day for a month. As well as we also have what they call Easy Pay, which is automatically 10 cents off every gallon of gas you buy, no matter what grade you're buying and how much. And then there's other gamification stuff. If you go to the Circle K website, you will see that there's some gamification things out there where you can win swag, you can win 30 cents off a gallon, a lot of other information out there, food and stuff as well. Okay. So what I want to do is create something where I can have different source points, where I could have different data from different devices or feed into what we were looking at. And so I created this, I call it the aqueduct. And in each one of our cloud environments, which you can see there, we have like AWS in the east and west, and Azure east-west. And then we have OCI in the east. And then we have a colo in Europe, and then we have 2 colos in North America. And so what we've done is we said, okay, I have 2 worker nodes now in each spot, okay, so those pull everything in, whether it's doing the event hub or it's pulling in different logs from the different cloud environments, as well as pulling the logs in from either the servers and such as well. So those come in. So what we do is at the end there is we're filtering and looking at the logs that we want, okay? Then what we're using is Cribl TCP to bring those back to basically to encrypt as well as compress that information. And that's where we're getting the savings from the egress charges, right? So now that's coming back to my nodes in North America. North America is where I push them through the pipelines and the routes to go back up to the SIM. The reason I'm doing it there is because in some cases, I might have to, I'm working with the business right now, so this is kind of a future, but fork off data and fork off information while it's still in the raw for the developers so they can see something, right? Yep. Or for the operations team so they can do just in time if they have to build systems, put more resources or something out there, right, for that customer experience.
Right.
And so from that perspective, that's where then comes back and then it flows out. But the idea is everybody can plug in somewhere they need to. I just have to make sure I have some stop gaps so I don't get too much data at one time and not aware of it. And then also in a legend, we've listed up there, okay, what the resources look like for that environment itself.
So we talked a lot about your journey, what you've done. What are the biggest considerations and recommendations? We know, Todd is pretty much a lecturer, professor over here. He's going to have his quotes in a textbook someday. So tell us some considerations and recommendations for other people who are either just getting started, who are also a year in, like you as well.
Okay. So one little thing about me, I have a very high paranoia index. So I get accused of that all the time. So really what we're looking at here are some of the considerations, right? All right, so have a vision. And what I mean by have a vision, put the years of experience about logging, about tools, about everything, forget it, right? Just think about, what if I could do whatever? And just put those things out on paper and think about it, right? That's what I did, and that's where I'm coming with the Cribl, is I'm thinking outside that box. I'm not being my own worst jailer by staying with what the other tools I've had kept me in that box of what I can and can't do.
Yeah.
So it's really important to step outside of that. So you need to have a vision, and then share that vision not only with your account team and stuff, because they might go, oh, that's a great use case and study, and then it works its way into a feature. But as well as share it with the business, right? Get their viewpoint as well, because you'll see a lot of times that might overlap. Right? And so now you can also be a benefit to your business, as well as not only your security or operations teams. So for me, it was have a vision, understand where you want to go or what you would like to do, right? And of course, it'll change as it matures. Knowing your data is huge. Now, what is your data telling you? Now, everybody always says know your data. Oh yeah, that's Palo data, or that's checkpoint data, or that's Windows event logs or performance logs or whatever. That's not what I'm talking about. When I say know your data, what are you looking for within those logs that can be data driven for your security team, right? What does that mean? If it doesn't mean anything to you and doesn't mean anything else, get rid of it. Drop it on the floor, right? Don't pull it in just because you think you might need it in the future. Because if you haven't needed it in the period of time you're looking at it, your odds are you're not going to. And if you worry about that, fork it off somewhere else. Send it to another, some cold frozen storage somewhere if you're really worried about that.
And you say it very well. You say, send what's actionable to the SIEM.
Yeah.
That actionable data.
Yeah. So whenever I get a request, my first question is, what's the data? What are we gleaning from the data, and what's actionable? If they can't answer those things, I'm like, when you can answer those questions, come back to me.
Yeah.
Now, and sometimes we even get the vendors on the phone, because we have a lot of emerging technology within retail space and terminals and all that, pipelines. We'll have to use Cribl to see what the logs look like, and then try to figure them out, and then see, okay, how can we ingest those so they don't end up in a main index somewhere as being gobbledygook, right? So that was where also that power that Cribl comes into, where we're talking about know your data, but also have that vision, but move fast and get to onboarding quickly, right? So that's very important. Packs are on here. I like using the packs. They're a good starting point. You can open those up, look at them, use them as your pipeline. You can go in and actually edit those. But if you do that, make sure you rename it. Because if you don't, when the pack gets updated, it'll rename it for you. And then also looking at, the understanding your architecture and your resource limitations. To me, that's very important. When I say the architecture, what systems you actually have control of, can you predict the behavior of those hosts? And that could be a third party like in OCI, right? They want to manage their own load balancers. You got to use their technology. But if you're used to another technology, they're not the same. They do completely different things. And if you have to change something, what does that change code look like from that end, and how long does it take to get back, right? So that's important, as well as understanding of any of your PAN solutions or EMRs, everything in general, and how it comes and how it works and where you want to do it. Because Some of your logs, they might come through syslog, but they might be coming through from a encrypted point of view, right? Are you encrypting the channel and are you encrypting the data? It all depends on the vendor and what you're looking at, right? And some best practices say you have your channel encrypted and your data is encrypted, right, one way. So really understanding that and looking at your resources, bringing that together, and then doing something with all that data. So every day, we go back and we look at our data, whether we get alerts or not. And we try to refine it. We try to find some. So a lot of people call it hunting. Okay, we put hunting on there. But it's not just hunting, right? It's also, is this information, are we truly getting information we looked at? How was the last time you reviewed it? When's the last time you reviewed your GRC information to make sure you were getting what you thought you were going to get? So we have milestones monthly to make sure that what we're seeing is what not only we need for regulations, but what we're also seeing for the business, as well as what we need for security. And so that's kind of when I talk about architecture and your resource limitations.
Yeah. And so hopefully everybody, has gotten a lot of ideas from all of the other presentations and our keynote about some things that you could be doing, some additional things you could be doing. Tell us a little bit about your year 2 journey.
The future is bright. Sorry, I couldn't resist. After today, I've already had a list of wishful thinking and directions that we wanted to go, right? So we talked about our logging. One of the things on my list was, I'm going to go back through the logs again and see what I don't need and refine them even more. But I failed to mention one thing with GRC, or with our performance logs as well, is that I'm also using sampling there. Like on the performance side, if you guys CPU is 100%, you need an alert every time for that? No, you should sample that, for example, right? So you drop the other ones on the floor to get to a certain point, then it goes up and it gives you a proper alert. Failed to mention, I'm sorry.
No,
but
you're good.
Future is that let's just put it this way. If I'm allowed to come back, this is my first year, right, journey with Cribl. I'd love to share with you my second year because I have a lot of things spinning through my head right now and directions I want to go using Cribl to not only enhance and mature what I'm doing globally with cyber operations, but also what I can do with the business.
Yes, that's great. And Todd will be around for happy hour afterwards, hanging out in Cool Lab and everything. So if you have more questions for him, definitely go up and ask him. But he is a very busy guy, so I'm going to be his goat keeper for anything after today.
Yeah.
So if you do have more questions for him, just shoot me an email or find me on community Slack too.
One last thing, I have to say this. The Cribl University, if you're a Cribl customer, cool. If you're not, you're looking at it, you're unsure what things are going, go get an account. Because nothing will tell you more about the product and what you can do with it than just going through a few of those classes and they're free.
Yep.
Right, give you that strong background of what's available. So, because I had my business units and different folks do that as well, so they come back to me like really trust it and like, well, I didn't know you could do these things with it. So maybe expand some use cases. But thank you.
Thank you so much, Todd.